I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to the story. We're starting at a farm just north of Albany in the Willamette Valley. We're here because we wanted to check in on a law that was passed by Oregon lawmakers a year ago that requires time and a half for farm workers working in fields like this. So it's been a year. Let's check in to see how that new law is working out. It's a sweltering day in early July. The temperature is already 85 degrees by 10 a.m. 80 pickers here are quickly and carefully plucking blueberries off branches on a 12-acre farm. Many of these workers are regulars who live in the area and come back year after year to work for the farmer, Annie Kramer Steinkamp. But this year, she expects her workers will make less money than they're used to. She's sending them home after they hit 55 hours for a week, so she doesn't have to pay overtime. And it's obvious to you, but why does it have such a big impact on you? Because I could hear people out in the audience saying, in most other professions, if you work more than 8 hours, you do get time and a half, and businesses just, they plan for that.
Yep. So in ag, we've never had overtime. A lot of people come work ag in the harvest time to pretty much make the butter on top of their biscuit. You know, this is where they make their extra money in the year round that they can take home and spend it on extra stuff or help pay bills, stuff like that. But if we have to sit and we have to limit their hours, they don't get to help make that extra. So.
And is what you're saying is that it's one thing to pay somebody 16 hours at straight time, but you can't pay them 8 hours regular time and then 8 hours time and a half. That extra half is enough to make it unprofitable for you?
Very unprofitable.
I met Annie 2 years ago as the Oregon legislature debated whether to end an exemption more than 80 years old that kept Oregon farm workers from earning overtime after putting in 40 hours a week. Members of the legislature were pushing hard to follow Washington and California in enacting the change. Andrea Salinas, now a U.S. representative in Congress, was a member of the state legislature then and a leading voice.
I don't blame anybody today for setting that system up, but I do take responsibility for changing a system that was rooted in racism.
And the president of Oregon's largest farm workers union said it would help farmers keep good workers.
And not only a matter of equity and dignity and respect, but if we don't implement something, we also fear that people are going to choose to go to Washington or not come back, especially our migrant farm workers who are already saying, hey, I get paid overtime in this other state, and I'm questioning whether I'm going to come back again next year. The bill passed and is being phased in over 5 years. It also included tax credits for farmers to help them adapt. For the years 2023 and 24, workers must be paid 1.5 times their regular pay for every hour over 55 hours worked in a week. For the year 25 and 26, it goes down to 48 hours, after which time and a half must be paid. And in the year 2027 and all the years that follow, the limit is 40 hours. After that, workers must be paid time and a half. Back in 2022, Annie worried about the impact the law would have on her operation. Her workers are paid by the amount they pick. She said an average picker makes $18 to $20 an hour, and the top make $40 an hour. Now in 2024, she is still worried. Okay. And so how have you been dealing with that?
We've pretty much been working our workers till the 55 hours, and then we send them home. So we've brought in extra people to help keep the hours down. We schedule days off throughout the week. And then me and my husband have been picking up the extra slack.
What's that like?
So it's a lot of work. I woke up at 3:30 this morning, and I probably will take phone calls till about 9 o'clock tonight.
Let's drill down so you can get a feel for income and outgo that farmers like Annie are dealing with and why the overtime bill makes them so nervous. On Annie's farm, she told me the cost to grow a pound of blueberries is around 50 to 60 cents. The cost to pick, pack, and ship that pound is about $1. Annie sells the berries to wholesalers and gets on average $2 a pound. That leaves her 40 cents a pound for supplies and expenses and savings for next year. To avoid overtime, Annie brings in extra workers now, so more people are getting paid, but she said her regular workers are actually now making less money.
It has gotten a little bit harder now that we have to cut people, so the guys don't like it. A lot of these guys are used to working, 60 to 80 hours in the summertime, because that's what we've been doing for years and years, and that's where they make that gravy on top of the biscuit. and now they don't get that. So,
Has it been hard to find the extra workers?
it's been hard to find like Pacific workers, like that can do forklifts, drive machines, truck drivers, that kind of thing. Just regular manual labor, we haven't had problems with that.
Okay.
So
Oregon's not the only place experiencing that. This article from the Sacramento Bee pointed out that California farm workers were also getting less pay after an overtime law was passed there as well. I checked in with Picayune, that's Oregon's largest farm labor union. Their policy and advocacy director says it's too soon to tell how many farm workers are earning less because of the new law. I think what you're saying is you're not convinced really that it's happening on a wide scale?
That's correct. We're not convinced that farm workers are being impacted in a negative way across the state. But I think there's a lot of different experiences and a lot of different decisions and factors at play. But at the end of the day, I think it's too early to tell on our end.
But a spokesperson for the Oregon Farm Bureau says farms and ranches across the state are all doing what they can to avoid paying that overtime.
I would say they're probably paying as little overtime as possible because they don't have an ability to recover those costs. However, some are bringing in additional workers. Some are just lowering their productivity and deciding not to grow certain labor-intensive crops. Others are mechanizing. I've heard from quite a few operations that they have invested in machines that can do that work and actually have resulted in significant cost savings.
Which brings us back to Annie, who says farmers are not avoiding overtime because they're mean. They simply cannot afford it.
I think they picture it as more of like a manufacturing where they can raise their prices and take in that overtime cost, but they forget that farmers are a price taker. So our fresh price changes every week.
And you mean the price that you're being offered by the people who are going to buy your berries?
For my fruit changes every week.
And you don't have any control over that?
And I have no control on the say of it.
And it has a direct impact on your profit?
Yes. So.
Yeah. So you can't just add that onto the price of your product?
Nope. I cannot. I can't say, hey, I need more money because I'm going to have to pay overtime. And they're going to laugh at me and say, nope, this is what we're offering.
Wow. But it seems like you would have parity with all the other growers in Oregon. So those people that are buying
and I don't
the
think
berries,
they're paying overtime either.
Yeah.
So
you think
I talked to a bunch of growers throughout the year, and there was a little bit of overtime in the spray season, a little bit of like main guys in the summertime, and that's about it.
Well, I'm Evan Watson in for Pat tonight. He's still feeling under the weather, but we'd both like to know, what do you think about Oregon's farm worker overtime law? Do you think it will lead to less money for workers as farmers like Annie avoid paying overtime? Or do you think that's just the lay of the land now and things will sort of even out as the threshold for overtime gets lower and lower in the years to come? Email the story at kgw.com or call and leave a voicemail 503-226-5090. Sad news today in Oregon politics. Oregon's longest serving lawmaker, former Senator Peter Courtney, has died at the age of 81. Governor Tina Kotek made the announcement this afternoon. Courtney died in Salem surrounded by his family from complications related to cancer. Courtney, a Democrat, served as the Senate president for 20 years. He spent 24 years altogether in the Senate and another 14 years in the House of Representatives. He retired in January of 2023. Over his decades in Salem, Courtney worked on increasing mental health services, seismic upgrades, and raising funds for K-12 schools, among many other things. In fact, today in Salem, the Oregon State Hospital's campus was renamed in his honor. The ceremony was planned well before he died, and Governor Tina Kotek said the recognition was a long time coming.
He took a significant personal pleasure in looking literally at the plans for this building and working with those who were making the new building happen. It made him incredibly happy when he talked about it. And then he probably did some shouting about it too, but he was really happy about it.
Now, one thing to know about Peter Courtney, he was a guy with a lot of personality, and he told you exactly what he was thinking. We talked with him around the time he was retiring just over a year ago, and he told Pat he didn't know what he was going to do after politics.
What will be next for you? I don't really envision you sitting in a rocking chair on the front porch.
There you go. Now that really got me. I'm just going to watch the river come up. I live in a river. I'm looking at it. Jesus, coming up. I don't know. I don't play golf. I don't have a perfect hobby. That's another question you're asking me. And again, I was sad before I started this interview. Now I'm outright depressed thanks to you, Pat Doris. I don't know. I have no idea what I'm going to do. And I don't know. I have no magic, beautiful plan. Every plan I ever had in my life never happened. So maybe this is good.
Perhaps you could get an RV and travel the country with your wife.
No, I'm not going to get an RV and travel the company. I don't know. How do you stay clean in an RV? I mean, in showers, you can't get in. There's not really water. I don't trust it in the toilet. I don't want it. No, I'm not going to do that and drive around. You want me driving around? No, I mean, I'd love to visit some historical sites, but I'm not going to get an RV and go ranting around and knowing me. I'm not going to. No. If you want an RV, you RV. I'm not RVing.
The man who succeeded Peter Courtney in the Oregon Senate is Democrat Rob Wagner. We talked with him this afternoon. He says he first met Courtney back in the 90s as an intern at the Capitol.
Peter gave a speech one time at the beginning of a legislative session where he called it the little things. And I think so it's not just one big thing. He obviously left an incredible contribution in everything from his care for animals or mental health parity or in our school system. But it was all the little conversations and all the little ways that he was a coach and a guide. So it was little conversations that you might have in a private moment on the floor. He always would take the time for any member to provide them counsel and to help them be not only a better legislator, but a better human being.
We've heard all afternoon from people who worked with Courtney at one point or another over his career. Former Oregon Governor Ted Kulongoski wrote, Senator Peter Courtney exemplified the true meaning of service in every aspect of his life, whether to his family, his friends, or an elected office. I most admired Peter's profound knowledge of and appreciation for the legislative process. Peter understood the nuts and bolts of the process. He could get things done. His long record of public service was extraordinary. We caught up with Senator Ron Wyden today, who called Courtney a juggernaut for his constituents.
Well, what I remember is Peter Courtney calling me up at 7 or 8 a.m. in D.C. to talk about a pressing matter, and it was like 4 or 5 in Oregon. And Peter was already out of the gate coming up with important ideas, again, to make Oregon an even better place. He was relentless.
And although he was a Democrat, several Republicans have sent their condolences. Oregon Senator Tim Knopp wrote, "It was an honor to serve with Peter Courtney in the Oregon Senate. He is one of the most impactful elected officials Oregon has ever had. He dedicated 4 decades of his life serving Oregonians and the institution he loved, respected, and protected." He went on, "Most importantly, Peter had a heart for and cared about people. He was the most formidable leader I've had the privilege to work with. He was fair, kind, and brought people together. He tried to make sure all Oregonians' voices were heard." The common thread we've been hearing all day, and what our team has seen over the years of covering Peter Courtney, he deeply loved Oregon, loved serving as a lawmaker, and loved the people he worked with. As we wrap up and head to break, let's listen to Peter Courtney's final remarks to the Oregon Senate in December 2022.
This business we're in is very hard, very hard. In my 44 years in politics, I've been hurt, I've been angry, I've had nasty things done to me, and I've seen a lot. But I must say, along the way somewhere I got blessed, because I was convinced that if I decided to be here, whether it's here or wherever, that if I couldn't care enough through whatever had been done, I don't belong here. And so for me, this statement about caring for one another is the ultimate thing that allows this institution to function, is the ultimate things that allows each of you in your personal lives and all your lives to survive. And it also allows you, when you leave here, to say, oh, you're a pretty good person and you've done a good job. Good luck in all ways. God be with you. Thank you.
Turning now to some political coverage in the state of Washington. We have 3 weeks until the primary election there, and a new poll shows Democrat Bob Ferguson is in the lead when it comes to the governor's race. The poll was done by Survey USA in partnership with our sister station King 5 in Seattle, the Seattle Times, and UW's Center for an Informed Public. It polled more than 560 likely primary voters. Washington AG Bob Ferguson has 42% of the votes. Republican former Congressman Dave Rickert is at 33%. Democratic State Senator Mark Mullet and Republican Simi Bird are in the single digits with 14% undecided. Drew Mickelson brings us a reaction from the candidates.
Democratic candidate for governor, Attorney General Bob Ferguson has the lead in the poll of registered voters across the state who say they will likely vote in next month's primary. Ferguson stands at 42%, with Republican Dave Reichert at 33%. The top two finishers face off in November. When you break down the numbers based on party affiliation, Bob Ferguson only gets 3% of the Republican voters, but 72% of Democrats and 1/3 of the independent vote. Dave Reichert has 76% of Republicans voting for him, 9% of Democrats say they'll back him, and 32% of independents say they support Reichert. What do the apparent favorites to face off in November think about the results?
It's my job as a candidate to make sure that all Washingtonians understand exactly where he stands on the most important issues facing Washingtonians and where I stand. And I think when voters see that contrast and those differences, they're going to be aligned with my view for the future state of Washington and not Congressman Reichert's.
Polls are polls, and they really don't get the entire pulse of the voting population, but they sure give campaigns an idea of where they might be, and I feel really good about where we are.
Republican Simi Bird, who has the endorsement of the state's Republican Party, questions the accuracy of the polling, feeling he will do better than 7%.
Dave Reichert has no chance of beating Bob Ferguson, and the reason is both of them represent establishment, more of the same, no change candidates. And the citizens of Washington state want something different.
Democratic State Senator Mark Mullet, who only received 4% in the poll, said, quote, "At this point, nobody's voted." He says voters are frustrated by extreme candidates, so he still seems hopeful. Because public safety has become such a huge part of political campaigns across the country, let's take a look at the 2023 Crime in Washington report. 590 pages in all. We're going to hit some highlights for you. Last year, crimes against people barely decreased, down by 0.6% compared to 2022, but still totaled over 110,000 crimes. Crimes against property were down nearly 12% for a total of nearly 360,000. Crimes against society, which include things like drug crimes, weapon violations, and animal cruelty, were up a whopping 22.4% last year, with over 21,000 of those crimes. Violent crimes were down 5.5% compared to 2022, with around 31,000 offenses. We thought this page of the report was especially interesting. Washington's crime clock, showing on average how often some of these crimes are happening in the Evergreen State. The big ones on the left: a crime against a person happening at least every 5 minutes, a murder once a day, a rape every 3.5 hours. And how about on the right side? A property crime happening in Washington every 90 seconds, including burglaries every 14 minutes. Another interesting piece of data is that juvenile arrests were up nearly 24% from 2022 to 2023, with over 7,700 arrests statewide. And just over half of those arrests were kids between the ages of 13 and 15. The report also notes that Washington ranks last in the nation when it comes to the number of officers per 1,000 residents. That rate of officers fell to 1.35 per 1,000, which the report says is the lowest ever recorded in Washington. They add the national average is 2.31 officers per 1,000 residents. Let's hear from you, Washingtonians out there. Have you sensed an increase or decrease in crime in your neighborhood, or the type of crime that you're seeing? Email the story at kgw.com or leave a voicemail, 503-226-5090. And speaking of police staffing, this week the Vancouver City Council unanimously passed a resolution to allow voters to decide on something called Proposition 4 during the November election. It's a levy to boost police services with a proposed property tax hike. How much could it cost you? Details when the story returns. Well, the KGW School Supply Drive begins next month, and we need your help. Head to kgw.com/school to sign up your organization, and we'll send you a collection kit. And keep in mind, supplies you help collect will stay in your school district. Again, that's kgw.com/school. Now let's get to details on that police services levy in the city of Vancouver. This week, council approved Prop 4 for the November ballot. If approved, here's what the city says it would do. Add up to 80 sworn officers, 36 full-time non-sworn police positions, keep equipment and vehicles up to current and future standards, a traffic enforcement camera program, expand the police department's homeless assistance response, and keep up with maintenance and admin expenses. So how to pay for all that? A property tax hike. Right now it sits at $2.08 per $1,000 of assessed value. This levy would increase that number by 41 cents for 2025, bringing it up to $2.49 per $1,000 of assessed value. And it would also allow for 5% annual increases of the levy for 6 years. The city says the estimated annual impact for someone who owns a $500,000 home would be an additional $205 in property taxes next year and an additional $585 in 2030. This idea was developed by the 13-member Police Advisory Committee convened by the city manager. That group also says in order to round out police staffing needs, voters would need to approve a facilities bond in 2026, as well as what they're calling a public safety sales tax in 2028. Those are obviously down the road a bit, but voters will have a say in the first step of that process with Proposition 4 coming up in November. That is the end of our show tonight. Thank you very much for watching and being here with me. A programming reminder for you, we will not have a show for you tomorrow or Thursday because of NBC's coverage of the Republican National Convention. But we will be back on Friday at 6:30. In the meantime, day 2 of NBC's coverage of the RNC is coming your way next. Have a great night.